On today's show, how the Indiana Pacers got their Game 4 blowout win against the New York Knicks with their defense. Can this new defensive intensity carry forward in the series? Indiana's bench impact led by TJ McConnell and Tom Thibodeau's heavy usage philosophy taking a toll on the Knicks. It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. And all you have to do is wager $5. Right now you can head over to FanDuel.com and take a look at the outright betting favorites for the title this NBA season. The Boston Celtics minus 140 to win it all. The Denver Nuggets plus 370 behind them, and then the Minnesota Timberwolves distant third place favorites at plus 800. So for all those odds and so much more, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Pacers, Tony East. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts, and on YouTube, just search Locked On Pacers. Here as the Pacers evening things up in their series with the Knicks after a brutal if you're a Knicks fan, Game 4 blowout win, 121-89. Tony, in this game, obviously the offense was clicking in this one, but it really felt like the story of the game was the defense for the Pacers. I mean, arguably their best defensive performance the entire postseason, holding the Knicks to just 89 points, or if you want to be honest, we'll say 63 points through three quarters, because let's be honest, that's when the game was like basically over, was the end of the third quarter, maybe even a little bit before that. Only 34% shooting for the Knicks. What was the key to this defensive intensity that we saw out of this Pacers team?
Yeah, they've been like rampant. It's weird. Their first two games were so bad on defense. 121 in the game one, 130 in game two. And for all the moaning about the refs, like if you guard like that, you lose. Like who cares about the calls? They had to be better on that end. And since then, granted, OG Anunoby is out and Jalen Brunson had a foot injury in game three, but much better. 106 in game three, and now 89. You said best defensive game of the postseason. I'll one up you and say of the entire season, regular season included, their best defensive game. And I understand that it's because the Knicks have some injuries, but like 89 is crazy good in any NBA game, honestly. And you nailed the number. They held them to 33.7% shooting. One more miss from the Knicks, and they'd have made 1/3 of their shots. A couple things stood out. Getting better on Brunson throughout the series. They switched Nesmith onto him after the first two games. He's been much better, at least at making him like slow down a half beat, and that helps their backside defense recover. Halliburton was on DiVincenzo to start this game. That was new throughout this series, and DiVincenzo's been lighting him up, but Halliburton is a little better in that off-ball setting, and DiVincenzo stopped making all of his shots. So those are the things that stood out the most, and they can kind of like hide guys a little better when Precious Achiuwa's out there. Knicks are just too banged up. So if Brunson's not cooking and they can slow DiVincenzo a bit, combined with some tweaks, they actually look like a real defensive team in this game. It was very impressive.
So does this feel like because sometimes in these blowout games, right, it's hard to glean a lot of like, accurate information. Yeah. Sometimes it's just one team's incredibly hot, one team has a complete off night shooting, but does it actually feel like the Pacers have unlocked something or figured out a few things that they can take with them moving forward throughout the rest of this series?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this was so bad from the Knicks, like from a shooting percentage perspective. I don't expect that. That said, but going into the fourth quarter of game three, they were over 50% for the series, right? So they were due for some from three. So they were due from some shooting regression, but not this. This was ridiculous. So I think they are figuring some stuff out. Clearly, I just talked about some of the tweaks, but I don't think it will be this good. Rick Carlisle said it best, I thought, after game four, like throughout this Pacers playoffs, every game has felt so different from the previous one. Like both teams adjust and tweak and look back at what they did well and poorly, and they come out, and it doesn't feel that similar. They've only had two games to me that really felt similar, which was game 3 of their second round series versus game 3 of their first round series, which is ironic because it was different opponents. But most of the time, it's just felt like all over the place. You never know if they're going to be good on offense or bad on offense, good on defense, bad on defense. And again, they make progress. They won their first round series. They're tied 2-2 now, but it's really hard to say. I think that's kind of a consequence of a young team that's a little inconsistent. We'll see. But if the Knicks are this banged up, maybe they can do it again.
Yeah, speaking about the Knicks being completely banged up, I mean, the bench production has completely favored the Pacers in this series, and it was massive in this game. And kind of a big turnaround from game 3, right? You know, not a ton of bench production there in game 3. Massive, you know, guys stepping up in a really big way here in game 4. And kind of, I feel like the catalyst of all that, right, is TJ McConnell there in the middle on both sides of the floor, man. I mean, TJ McConnell is playing out of his mind right now this postseason.
He is. The bench is so fascinating that they did not play well in game 3 in a win, but they've been a good unit all postseason. And I was curious what their impact would look like in the series because it's so natural to think like, oh, the bench for New York's really shallow. That's an advantage for the Pacers. But it's like good Pacers bench players aren't playing against a Knicks bench. They're playing against Jalen Brunson, you know, and starters, right? So how much does energy matter versus talent in a playoff game is more what that's about. And early in the series, it was tilted a little towards the Pacers. Game 3 was definitely towards the Knicks. And this was way towards the Pacers. And McConnell's all of it, right? He is the reason these bench groups are so good because he can get in the paint whenever he wants. Every possession. He just gets by his man or Nash dribbles under the basket or whips around right before he touches the three-point line and gets to the rim. And so either he's open or Obi Toppin's open or there's a lob to Isaiah Jackson or like, hey, Ben Shepherd, no one knows who this rookie is. Oh, look, he's open to the corner. Like, it's precise. It's awesome. And Siakam sometimes is in there and Nesmith's in there. It doesn't matter. Like, he just creates all these good shots. And so you kind of saw it go away in the first round. The Bucks would go zone the second McConnell would check into the game because he's not like a willing shooter. He's making them in the playoffs, but he takes like 1 a game. But that as soon as the Knicks have gone man against this bench, they can't keep up. And I think we've seen that energy really turn some of these games around. He's been very good.
At this point, you look at kind of the way the series started, right? A couple very close games, you know, in New York at Madison Square Garden. You know, a couple things break a little bit differently. Maybe one of those, maybe both of them are Pacers wins instead. What can they take from, I guess, the close games of this series, right? Looking back, reflecting on some of those games. I know you just said that no 2 games in the series have been alike, or no 2 playoff games really for the Pacers have been alike, except for those, you know, those couple game 3s. But what lessons can they learn from those games and try to, you know, go into game 5 and be able to take, because they're going to have to take a game at some point from the Knicks on the road, which they haven't been able to do it yet.
Yeah, every playoff game in Madison Square Garden is like the greatest basketball game of all time too. So
good every time.
It's been, even their first round series, it was insane. The thing about the Pacers defense in the clutch has been really bad, right? So a lot of their close games, they've been praying they can keep up offensively, right? They beat the Bucks in that crazy overtime in game 3 where they got going on offense, and that's how they won that one. Finally, in game 3 of this series, they defended pretty well down the stretch of that one before Nembhard hit like a miracle shot. But you saw in games 1 and 2, game 1 had some funky stuff at the end. I'm not going to talk about it, but they didn't defend well at all. Like in the clutch, and Brunson just got to his spot and scored, or he hit Hartenstein, who hit DiVincenzo, and he scored. And that's what the Knicks do, man. They like grind you down all game long, and then they target the mismatch they want, and they get a good shot out of it. And so you have to be very precise and very focused on defense, and that has not been the Pacers' thing this season, obviously, especially in the clutch. And so if these games in MSG turn into what every Knicks game is, where it's within 5 points in the last 5 minutes until today, then the Pacers have to defend better in the clutch, and they've shown progress defensively throughout the series, but no one has figured out how to beat the Knicks in the clutch except for Tyrese Maxey hitting ridiculous shots for, 30 seconds. So that's what it's going to be to me, is can they guard when the chips are down? Can they actually stop Jalen Brunson in serious moments? Brunson's had 2 less effective games in a row. I think some of that is the Pacers. I think some of that's his foot. He has like very little burst right now. So we'll see where this trends, but that would be the key to me for them to get over the hump at MSG, is if it does turn into a Knicks game where it's neck and neck at the end, can they actually guard?
I'm curious because you mentioned this earlier, right? The idea, or kind of the philosophy here of, you've got the Pacers bench, rested, energized, whatever, going up against the Knicks starters though. But, so energy versus talent, whatever argument you want to make it. Do you think there's maybe some merit here to this discussion of, has Tom Thibodeau pushed his players too hard, right? We hear it all the time with Tibbs, the minutes loads on all his players historically, right, through the roof. But now we're seeing a Knicks team that is just completely fallen apart, right? Dropping like flies, different guys going down with different injuries. And on top of that, now you see a game, game 4 here where the Knicks just look beat up and exhausted, like not even after the first quarter finished.
So let's start with the classic podcaster line of neither of us are doctors. Julius Randle has a shoulder injury. Like, that's not because he played a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
Right. I forget what Bojan's is. Like, OG Anunoby is a hamstring injury. Again, not a doctor, but like maybe that one's related to playing a lot. I think Mitchell Robinson's was an ankle that was like from an actual contact play. So on one hand, no, like half the reason they have no depth is because they have guys who had surgery, right? Like that just sucks. But you nailed it for this game specifically. Like, they had to bring in Alec Burks and Shake Milton and all these guys in the first 3 quarters because, then this was a shorter flip round. They played at 7 on Friday and then 3:30 on Sunday. So whatever that is, 40 hours, right? It's shorter. They already have a shorter bench. It's been an every other day series because of the NHL and MSG and Caitlin Clark and all this stuff. Like, the scheduling's hard. So they look gassed. I think you were absolutely right. And I thought we've seen the Knicks do this. Josh Hart played 2 full games in a row. What? How? Like, I thought they would just come back and keep playing their guys and be fine, but they couldn't do it in this one, right? Like, so I wonder if people have called it a war of attrition. I think that's a good phrase. I wonder if they've hit the point where the minutes aren't related to the injuries, but it does matter for the performance of the guys who are still available. But 2 things are going good for the Knicks now. 1, they're going back home, their own bed, better recovery, their own resources. 2, after game 5, for the first time in the series, 2 days off before game 6. So if they can win game 5 at home and get that, maybe Anunoby can come back. I don't know, but at least their guys will be well rested. So game 5 becomes extra pivotal because of that. And I think that's been a very interesting factor in the Knicks and where they are and what they could be going forward.
Who will ultimately take the pivotal game 5 in this series? Will it be Pacers? Will it be Knicks? Will the added rest have any benefit here in this series? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Pacers. Tony, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.